Good morning, everyone. Check, am I audible?
Yes, you
Yes,
are.
ma'am.
Okay, good. So, hi, Mas Ganta, how are you?
Hey, Miss, I'm good. How are you?
Good. So, long time no see. Heard that
Yeah.
you are in Jakarta now.
Yes, it's right. I'm in Jakarta right now.
Okay, good. So,
Yeah.
uh, wish you all the best luck in Jakarta.
Thank you, Miss.
Okay, guys. So, we are going to start our general lecture today with Mas Ganta or Kak Ganta. So later on he will introduce himself to you, and he is one of podcasters, yeah. And I'm pretty sure that you will be interested in his talk. And guys, before we start, so please turn on your camera so that we do not only see your photos and it can be more interactive. So please turn on your camera while waiting for the others. Mas Ganta, actually we have around 80 students, yeah, more than 80 students. So I think while waiting for them, we can just start maybe with your introduction first and then, yeah. Okay, guys, turn on your camera. So that's it. Mas Ganta today is going to talk about podcast. Since this start from this week and next week, we are going to discuss this topic. Okay, so without further ado, Mas Ganta, over to you. Thank you.
Okay, Miss Lina, thank you for the time. Okay, so while we're waiting for the others, maybe we can just start. Okay. Okay, how are you, everyone? Good morning. Is it still morning? Okay, yeah. Good morning, everyone. Okay, let me introduce myself. My name is Ganta. I have a podcast. It's called Bajulbal Podcast, and uh, I started the podcast since 2019 before COVID era. Then when COVID hits the world, yeah, we started the podcast more and more, and yeah, until today, I think we have reached more than 10,000 listeners in Spotify. So yeah, today I'm gonna talk about how to make a podcast, or I just share about our podcast. We have some structure. Well, when we want to have a podcast. So okay, let me share my screen. Can you guys see the screen? Okay. Okay, to make it easier, I'm gonna use mixed languages. Yeah, maybe some in English and maybe some in Indonesian. Okay, so uh, maybe everyone thinks about today. Everyone thinks about podcast. Yeah, everywhere we see podcasts on YouTube, on Spotify, or even on television. So I'm gonna tell you about a brief history about podcasts. So maybe some of you already know the history of podcasts, and maybe some never know about podcast, how it created in early 20s. Okay. Has anyone have done podcasts before? Or this is the first time?
For me, it's my first time.
Okay, first time. Anyone else? Or maybe you guys familiar with podcasts, or yeah, I'm sure you have listened to, some or several podcasts. Anyone else? What podcasts do you usually listen?
Or maybe Mas Ganta, last 2 semester they had their internship. So maybe because
Okay.
you did internship and you dealt with this podcast activities, so please share your experience
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
of listening or making podcasts.
Okay. So I'm sure that everyone here is familiar with podcast today, yeah. Maybe we just listen to the podcast, or maybe we already created an episode, but we're not sure that it is podcast or not. Okay, that's fine. That's don't worry. Okay, so about the history of podcast. So podcast didn't come up by itself in 1980s. There is a source founded that audio blogging was already there during 1980s, The term is still audio blogging, not podcast. Then after that, in early 20s, 24, yeah, year of 24, 2004, there is called iPod broadcast. So podcast means iPod broadcast. It was founded by Adam Curry, MTV VJ, and Dave Weiner. That is software developer. So Steve Jobs, the CEO of Apple's, on 2005, he also put on software updates that is called podcast on iTunes. So during 2005 and until today, we are we are all familiar with podcasts. We can see podcasts on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, and even on YouTube. Okay, the original format of podcast was only the audio. This is before today, yeah, because it's still audio blogging. So basically you just record what you were doing. You record like journaling, but you talk with it and you record it. Basically podcast was like that. So today we have uh we experience a lot of type of podcasts. Like we can see interviews, we can see business podcasts, we can see like comedy podcasts, and most of them are created by video. Okay, so there is a change. Okay, before we create a podcast, or before we make a podcast, we need to make sure that we have the podcast framework. Okay, there is like four things that you need to do, or you need to prepare. First thing is what type of podcast you want to create. Then after that, you go down to uh more detailed things, like you need to write up, or you need to prepare for your pre-production, your production, and your post-production. I'm gonna explain it later. Okay, the first important thing is you need to understand what type of podcast you want to create, because it is important to know what type of podcast you create, to get your audience, to understand your audience. Okay. Okay. So, what type of podcasts are there? I pick like 4 or 5 type of podcasts that are common today. There is solo podcast. Solo podcast means that you only talk by yourself and you record it and you upload it to the platform. That's solo podcast. You basically talk alone in your podcast. And the second one is interview podcast. Interview podcast means you are the host and someone else is a guest. So you invite someone to come to your podcast to talk about something. And then discussion panel. Discussion panel is more than 2 people, more than 2 person. To maybe there is 2 hosts and 3 guests. Yeah. Discussion panel means like you just like there is a session of discussion that you record on podcast. Then the other one is co-hosted podcast. Co-hosted podcast means it's like solo podcast, but you have your friend to accompany you. So solo podcast means you're doing it by yourself. Then co-hosted podcast you have your friend to accompany you. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna give an example of our podcast of podcast that I started from 2019. So it's called Bajulbol Podcast. Okay, so Bajulbol Podcast was founded in 2019. I just told you at the beginning. Okay, so what is Bajulbol Podcast? Okay, back to here. You need to know what type of podcast you want to make. Okay, so the type of podcast of Bajulbol Podcast is like this. Okay, so you need to create your profile of your podcast. Okay, of course, the first one you need your name, the name of your podcast. Pick any name. Pick the name that are related to your topics. That is important. This is the example of Bajulbol Podcast. The name is Bajulbol Podcast. Why Bajulbol? Because it talks about football. It talks about Persebaya Surabaya, and Bajul means Javanese means crocodile. And ball is just football. So it's close with the team that I want to use. Okay, so Bajul Ball is an alternative media that focuses on podcasts and independent magazines or genius making. Okay, so 2019 we started Bajul Ball only focus on podcasts. But today we expand our creativity, not just podcasts, but we also make magazines or zines. Okay, so that's fine because we still have the podcast. Okay. After you have your name, after you pick your name, you need to have your foundational values of your podcast. That is important because of course your podcast has to be different with another podcast. So what's the point of making the same one? Something like that. So you need first one, originality. So originality means it comes up from your ideas, your own ideas. Maybe if you have your group, if you have your teams, it comes up with your team, from your team, not from other teams, not from other person that are not related to your podcast. And then yes, the first one, originality, that's very important thing. Then second one is collaboration. Collaboration means sometimes you can invite another person, another people to your to come to your podcast to do some collaboration, because of course sometimes we have run out of ideas, so we can ask people to help us for collaboration. And the third one is inclusivity. You need to make your podcast inclusive, not exclusive, because why? Yeah, because of course we need to be listened. So that's why we need to make it inclusive, and we need to make it free. Yeah. In the beginning, you need to make it free or available for everyone, but after that, when you have what's that? When you have your audience, when you have your loyal audience, maybe you can create some, some packages to make, to support your podcast. Maybe seperti berbayar gitu, nggak ada masalah sih. Cuman kan nanti dijelaskan kalau ini adalah fungsinya untuk apa namanya? Ya untuk bagaimana podcast ini berjalan juga gitu. Untuk mendukung gitu. That's fine. That's not a thing. Okay. So after you pick your name of your podcast, then you create your values of your podcast. You need to pick your theme about podcast. So, okay, Bajulbal Podcast, the theme of Bajulbal Podcast is sports. Why sports? Because it talks about sports and football and society. You may have more than two teams, not just one. Okay, for example, Bajulbal, it has three themes. We talk about sports in general, not just football. Maybe we can talk about another sport related to football, and then the second one, we of course talk about football itself, because it's football podcast. And we can talk about society. So society means people around the football, not just we don't just talk about football, but we talk about society as well, about what happened to the sporters, why sporters do this, why sporters do that, or why federation do this, why federation do that, or something else. So we also talk about the human as well, not just the football, not just the play of the game. Okay. After that, after you pick your name, after you come up with the ideas of your theme of your podcast, you can adjust your audience, your targeted audience, or your internet audience. This is important because you need to imagine, or you need to see who will listen to your podcast. Because if you cannot imagine who will listen to your podcast, yeah, it will stuck in the middle of the process of the podcast. So yeah, be specific in the beginning what kind of podcast you want to make, what theme of podcast you want to create, because you need to have your loyal audience or your loyal listeners. Okay, to connect effectively, we have identified and understand our audience. So you can make it two things about your audience. The first one is demographic audience in Bajulbal podcast are individuals and communities who support Persebaya Surabaya. So in demographics, so it means only in Surabaya. Okay, so your listeners basically are from Surabaya. That's the first thing. And maybe you can expand it more outside Surabaya. That means psychographics, or people who are interested in the relationship between football and society. So people who listen to Bajul Ball is not just from Surabaya, but also people who like talk about football and society. It doesn't mean you don't have to be Persebaya supporters to listen to Bajul podcast. That's inclusivity. So uh it doesn't give you a wall, something like that. Okay, yeah, this intended audience or targeted audience is very important, because yeah, this I told you before, because anything or any idea can come up from your own audience. Maybe any suggest, anything anything that you maybe don't think about it, your audience can talk about it. Okay, so After that, after we create or after we pick our title, we pick our team of teams or podcast, and we create we pick our audience, we come up the ideas who our audience are. Then in here we are ready to make some podcast, an episode of podcast. So remember, always mention your name. So this is this is already start. I mean, imagine that you are podcasting now. So in the beginning, you always have to remember to mention your podcast name. That is very important because maybe some people never listen to your podcast, then they don't know what podcast it is, even though it has the name or even though it has your logo of your podcast, but still people need to know what they listen to. Okay, your podcast name, of course. Remember to always mention that. Then description. So you need to describe about your podcast. Just short description, just a brief description about your podcast. For example, brief. Just something like this. Valuable is an alternative media that focuses on podcasts and independent magazines or zines making. That's a simple an example, yeah. So you need to make it clear what your podcast is. Don't make it too long because of course your audience want to listen to your podcast, not read your profile. Okay. Always introduce yourself. Always introduce yourself. What's your name, and maybe if you have partner of in podcast, you also mention your partner of your podcast host, and if you have guests or if you're doing interview podcast or if you're doing discussion panel, you need to introduce your guests as well, their names, their backgrounds. It is very important because again, maybe your listeners do not know who they are. Some people maybe know, but some people may not know about who you listen to. Okay, so remember that, introduce your guest background, names, and then who they are, what they are expert on, something like that. Okay. And then on your episode plan, this is episode plan. So you make some writing on papers or on your file. You write about it. After you write your podcast name, your description, and your guest, then you need to write about your audience. So write who this episode is for. Okay, in general, you may have one targeted audience in general, yeah. For example, in Bajul Ball, the general audience is individuals and communities who support Persebaya Surabaya. That's in general, but in specifically in every episode, it may be different because you always gonna create a different podcast episodes, not the same one. Okay, that's very important. Don't make the same episode, or don't make the same theme, or don't make the same topic in different episodes. So you need to come up with a lot of ideas when you're ready to create podcast. Okay, after that, in your episode plan, you need to write your episode title. Yeah, of course, every episode has its own title. Don't make it too long, just make it simple. Don't make it too long because of course your listeners just want to listen to your podcast, not read your title or your description. Okay. After that, you write your concept of your podcast episode. What is the episode about? After you write the title, you write what this is about. Is this about, yeah, you for example, in Bajul Ball, episode title and the concept of your podcast episodes, we just talk about, for example, we talk about the previous match. For example, this is just for example, we talk about previous match, maybe the last week's match. So what is the episode about? This episode is about the match of Persebaya Surabaya versus Persija Jakarta, for example, that Persebaya won the game 1-0. So the goal was scored by blah blah blah, and the match was amazing, something like that. Okay, just brief concept of your episode, because yeah, of course you will forget about your ideas if you don't write it down. Okay, after that, I think you're ready to do some production of your podcast. So in pre-production, you need to write it all on your papers, on your device, on your iPad, on your laptop, anything, but you need to write it down because it will guide you when you are creating a podcast. Okay, in production, of course, you need any recording devices. It can be anything. It doesn't have to be a mixer or sound card, but even you can use your mobile phone to record your podcast. If you don't have the utilities, if you don't have the mixer or sound card, you can just use your mobile phone to record your podcast episode. Okay, that's the important thing. You need to have your device, and then after that you will use your episode plan that you created before you create an episode. You complete your episode plan. If you complete your episode plan, yeah, from your podcast name, your description, about your guest, about your audience, about your episode title, and the concept of your podcast episode, then you may create or make some of questions or list of questions about the episode. If you do interview podcast, if you talk to another person of you, and if you talk to another guest or another person to come to your podcast as a guest, you need to have your list of questions. It's just simple, just use 5W1H. That's the most simple thing you can use. 5W1H, list of questions. You don't need to create and heavy questions. Just fun question is enough, I think. It depends on your concept of your episode, but in general, you need to have your recording devices, then your episode plan. You need to complete it as well. But don't create don't start your podcast if you don't have your episode plan and your list of questions, because you will get lost. You will get lost while you create podcast, maybe. But you need to know, but when you forget something, when you forget about your description of your podcast, for example, yeah, that's the thing. You need to have your notes, so you may not forget about what you want to talk about. But in some cases, in some professional cases, they don't use episode plan already because it's already in their head. But I think even it's professional or it's amateur or it's anything or it's for fun, we still need to have the episode plan and list of questions to just to just to create our ideas on the papers. But you can do some improvisation. You can improve anything if well, you create an episode and then you feel that, oh, this questions is not relevant anymore, you can change it or you can remove it. That doesn't matter. Improvisation is is allowed. Okay, after you record your podcast on your device, after that you can upload on a platform. The platform that I use, it's called Spotify for podcasters. Previously, it was known as Anchor, but I think from 2 years ago or 3 years ago, I forgot, it was bought by Spotify. Anchor was bought by Spotify, and then the name changed to Spotify but for podcaster. Okay, it's still the same thing, just a different name. Okay, that's one of the example you can upload on your podcast of your podcast. It's called Spotify Podcasters. It's free. You just need to have your Spotify account. Yeah, something like that. It's for free. It's yeah. You don't need to pay anything. You don't need to for you don't need to pay for anything. Okay, in Spotify for podcaster, you will see your statistics of your podcast, how many people listen to your previous episodes, and then in which country they are from, and then in what minutes they they usually or they listen more, something like yeah, some stats like that. You can find it in Spotify for podcasters. Then after that, of course, you need to create some editing. You need to use, or you can use Adobe Auditions, and then Adobe Podcast and any editing software that you are familiar to, maybe CapCut or maybe some mobile phones application. That's fine, as long as it has split and cuts. It doesn't matter. But from 2019, I use Adobe Audition to edit my podcast because I need to put an audio background, something like that, or audio effects, something like that, and Adobe Audition is capable of doing that. Okay, yeah, any editing software, CapCut also you can use it. Or yeah, I don't know, guys, maybe you know more about the application or editing software. Anything that is not, yes, try free software. Don't try, jangan jangan pakai yang berbayar lah gitu lah. Kalau bisa pakai yang free aja gitu. Tuh, karena ya to make it easier, memudahkan aja gitu sih sebenarnya. Then after that, after you finish your editing, after you edit your podcast episode, of course it was uploaded on Spotify for podcasters, but how are you or how people gonna know about your podcast? So you need to create your social media account, or you can use your personal account if you don't want to create account of your podcast. That's doesn't matter. Just any account. You can use your Instagram or your X, Twitter, or your TikTok, or any social media apps. I'm gonna tell you about Bajul Ball. In 2019, we just create an episode of podcast, but yeah, we just did it for fun. Actually, we did it for fun, and we did it for yeah, for ourselves. And then in we started, I think 3 or 4 episodes, and we started thinking that okay, we need to, because we didn't expect that people would listen to our podcast, but in fact, people listen to our podcast during the beginning of our podcast in 2019. So we have we had the idea of okay, we need to create an account from our social media. So we create Instagram account and Twitter account. So yeah, in there we promote our podcast episode. Not just promote our podcast episode, but we communicate, we discuss our episode podcast with our audience. So from there we gain more followers. Yeah, that's important to grow, yeah, to grow our podcast. So it means that our podcast is growing, more followers, more listeners. Okay. Also in Spotify for podcaster, it has I can't remember the name. It has the when you finish your when you reach your audience, I forgot the number. When you reach the numbers of audience, you can uh you can make money from it. You can make money from it. It means like every listeners or every audience that you that listen to your podcast, it come up with money in your account, but it's not very big money. And you also have your option whether you want to take your money or not. That's your account. Yeah, that's the idea of the team. But in Bajulable podcast, we never cash out the balance of the account, because yeah, we thought that in the beginning we started the podcast for not for fun, but yeah, we just want to talk about football and society. We don't want to make money, something like that. But of course, in another world, not podcast world, some people also invite us to to make, yeah, maybe to create a podcast, and then to be the host of an football event, football discussion, something like that. So but from podcast, we don't want to earn the money. We just keep that in the account. Okay. Okay. It's the currency is I think American dollars, but yeah, it's ribet lah kalau mau cash out sebenarnya itu. It's complicated. You need to have third party, something like that. So we decided to, okay, we don't want the money. We just create a podcast, and yeah, we talk like as football supporters and society, something like that. Okay, so don't forget also to promote on your social media, or maybe your WhatsApp group, or your anything, because when you promote in many groups or in many platforms, it means that um, more listeners or more audience will listen to your podcast. Maybe in the first time, maybe they're not interested in your podcast, but after listen maybe 2 minutes or 5 minutes of your podcast episode, they will be interested. Yeah, we don't know. Okay, so that's the fact of Bajul podcast in 2019. We didn't expect that people would listen to our podcast, but today, yeah, we have I can say that we have loyal listeners, something like that. Okay. Okay, maybe that's it. Maybe we can continue to our next session, Miss Lina.
So guys, before um before you create your own podcast, so I think it's a good sorry, it's a good opportunity for you to meet Mas Ganta and for him to share his knowledge, his experience. And please, while meeting him here right now, you can ask questions about podcast. And please do, let's have a discussion session right now. Okay? So questions, guys, to Mas Ganta about creating
Okay.
podcast. So,
Yeah. Okay, Miss Lina, maybe I forgot something. I'm
yeah.
gonna show you a template or the example of the episode plan.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Mas.
Okay. Wait. Can you guys see?
Not yet.
Okay, wait, sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, this is a template that I usually use. Wait, how can I make it full screen? Okay. This is a episode plan that I usually use. Okay. This is the easiest thing you need to create, yeah. There is another template of your episode plan, but I think this is the most simple thing. Okay, you need you of course you need to have your logo, your podcast logo from your name. You can create anything, you can draw it, you can make it from your internet. That's not a problem. Then, for example, podcast name. Okay. Description of your podcast. Okay, this is just the example. So episode title, just that's the example, yeah. Just that's just the example. And the concept of your episodes, yeah. Concept means you can, for example, Then you can write down the guest name. Yeah, anything, anyone lah. Mm. This is just the example. The audience. So in every episode, you may have different audience, you may have broader audience. So your concept of your podcast or your episode of your podcast, it can, you know, it is important to the audience. So for example, the guest will be from Surabaya, Jakarta, Bandung, and Semarang. So the audience will be also from Surabaya, Jakarta, Bandung, and Semarang as well, not just Surabaya. So it will bring the audience. Okay. Then write your name if you are the host, or if you have your partner, Kanta, and yeah, someone else if you have your partner. And then list of questions. Yeah, you guys know how to make questions. So this is depend on your podcast episode. It can be the same. It can be the same in every episode. Okay. This is the template that I usually use. This is the easiest, I think. You can understand it. You can understand it easier from here. Okay. Okay, I think it's good, Miss Ilana.
Okay, guys, it's time for you to ask questions regarding podcast and also what's next that you need to prepare or to do for your project. So, yes, please do ask questions while you meet Mas Kanta today. Bring up questions. Yeah, Rizky, please. Yeah, Rizky. Sorry, we cannot hear your voice.
Yeah, audible now, ma'am.
Oh yeah, good. It is now.
So actually, I have two questions for Mas Ganta regarding podcast.
Yeah.
The first one is, uh, in my experience to hear podcast, sometimes I notice that some podcasts use tease like uh, apa, cuplikan di podcastnya yang kayak menarik atau menghibur ditaruh di awal, habis itu baru masuk ke podcastnya. And sometimes there are podcasts that didn't use that, langsung ke opening, langsung ke basa-basi, langsung ke isi podcastnya. My question is that this is actually important for our podcast, or is it only based on our style, so we can choose to use this or not? And then my second question is, how when we make a podcast, we know that our audience is segmented based on what topic that we bring in our podcast. So my question is, how do we reach that segmented audience while our podcast didn't have that kind of algorithm and hashtags, something like in YouTube or Instagram. So how do we reach that kind of audience while we don't have that? I think that's all my questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rizky. Mas Ganta, maybe you can directly answer that. While for the others, please prepare questions. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Rizky. Rizky, yeah. Okay. Yeah, there are two good questions actually. So the first one is about the teaser. Yeah, some podcasters they may use a teaser before they started the podcast. Okay. I think okay. The question is it important to have the teaser or to make teaser? Yes. This is it is important because teaser is just maybe how many seconds, maybe 10 or 15 seconds. You don't need to have a long teaser, like you don't need to have your 1 minute teaser. You just need maybe 10 or 15 seconds of your highlights, the highlights of your talk. And also in Bajul Ball we also have teaser as well, but to make the teaser you need to complete your podcast first. The teaser is the teaser is the creation of the editing. You create the teaser while you edit your podcast episode. While you edit your podcast, your episode podcast, you find the highlight of your talk, you cut it, you split it, and you make it in the beginning. That's how teaser works. So if your question is it important? Yes, important to take the audience. Yeah, when you promote it on your social media, you don't just uh, tell, okay, this is our podcast, please listen. No, but also you need to put your something like that. Yeah, your teaser or your best talk, your 15 seconds talk as a teaser. Yeah, but I think not all podcasters use teaser. But if you want to make it properly, or if you serious about your podcast, yes, it is important to have your teaser, because yeah, we need to know about the highlights of your talk, of your podcast episode, before the audience listen to the full version of your episode podcast. Okay, that's the first one. It is very important. And then second one, about the segmented audience, ya. Tapi nggak punya algoritma yang seperti itu. Oke, I uh, I explain in the beginning. That's the importance of collaboration. That's the importance of how you can invite people or person that have names. If you don't have that kind of algorithm. Of course, in the first step of your podcast, in the first in the beginning of your podcast, you will find any difficulties. But after you've done maybe let's say 5 podcast episode, you will know what's the best plan of your podcast. Yeah, if you don't have any idea, of if you run out idea, you can create a collaboration with another podcasters, maybe, or with people that you are interested to, maybe. Yeah, for example, in Bajul Ball, of course we experience that. We experience about the difficulties of the ideas of making episode podcast. Then we come up, okay, how about we invite a Persebaya player, something like that. Okay, we in that time we didn't have that kind of algorithm, but when we invited a person that is popular, yeah, it will gain more, something like that. But of course, you need to work hard from that. I mean, of course, you need to prepare about why when they will come, are they available or not. There is the hard thing, because we don't know the person. They are popular person, they are busy, then we need to arrange that. But it is possible to do that, to do some collaboration with any other person. Okay, yeah. So the answer is, I think you need to do some collaboration, and you need to go hard on your promotion on your social media. That's it.
Yes, thank you, Mas Ganta, for your comprehensive answer.
Okay. Anyone else?
Next questions, guys. Yeah, Hafiz, please. Hafiz?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Okay, so Mas Ganta, so what things to be considered while making a podcast? I think like to be considered with the copyrights or the background noise, something like that. So how do we prevent this before while making a podcast? Thank you.
Okay. Okay, I'm gonna answer that. Okay, Hafiz, yeah. Okay, that's a good question about copyright, because you may listen to uh a lot of podcasts already, and then you have your questions. Okay, what about the copyrights of maybe some music in the creating of podcast? Of course, you will listen, you will hear about, you will hear musics, or you will hear sounds. That's the copyright. Okay, I'm gonna talk about the copyrights. Yeah, it is important to understand how copyright works. So maybe in the beginning of 2019-20, something like that. Yeah, in the beginning of Virtual Podcast, when we edit the podcast, we always, or we sometimes we put musics in our editing. So for example, in the beginning of podcast, we put some musics, another people's music, and then in the last one, in the last part, we also put some music on it. Then there is a new rules that you cannot use any kind of music without permission. So every episode that 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 has music in it, it would be removed. And Bajulbol also experienced that some episodes, maybe 3 or 4 episodes, and then yeah, okay. So after that, we create our own music. I mean, yeah, we just use like application, just like GarageBand or any kind of music application. Just create maybe 1 minute of music to make the introduction, and then yeah, you put on your editing. So yeah, you need to consider about the copyrights. You don't make mistakes on choosing any kind of music, because when you choose any music, and maybe the system can read the algorithm about you know uh any music, so your episode will be taken down. that will happen. That will happen, and that's what happened in Bajul Ball in 4 episodes, I think. Yeah, it was removed from the list. That's fine. Old. That's the old episodes, so it doesn't matter. But today, I think starting from 2 years ago, we already created our own music. We make we record it. We record our intro. So we make our intro. We make uh our highlights, something like that. So we don't use uh people's music anymore. So yeah, that's the good questions to consider about the music copyrights. Yeah, for example. Okay, and the second one, the noise. Of course, you need to consider if you have a good device, or if you have good utilities, you may record or you may create an a podcast episode outside. Okay, but if you don't have a good recording devices, remember to just to create inside the room, so we don't hear any noises from outside. But if you have good recording devices, that's fine. Okay, and then if you have the skill of editing, you can make it you can make the noise, you can remove the mode, you can remove noise. But yeah, that's complicated, I think. But the easiest thing is to begin the podcast, just stay inside the room. Then after maybe 5 episodes, you know how to make podcast. You are familiar with your own podcast. Maybe you can go outside, play with another setting situations. But remember, you need to have your good devices, or good skill of editing. Okay, but yeah, I think if you want to experience another thing, you need to go outside, not just in the room. That's fine. Okay. Last episode, we created a podcast episode uh outside the stadium. It has noise, but we have good device and we have good skill of editing, but so that's fine. That's fine. Okay. Okay.
Thank you, Mas Ganda. I will
Oh,
listen to the podcast.
okay. Thank you, Hafiz.
Yeah, actually, this is also one of the ways to promote your podcast by having a talk, ya Mas Ganta ya.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. Yeah, so that after this you can listen to Bajul Bul podcast as good examples, yeah, on what Mas Ganta explained this morning. Okay, thank you. So next questions, please. Yeah, Patria.
Is there any limit to what we can talk or do in the podcast? Because I've seen like there are some podcasts that, well, they can use like swear words and all that. They can talk about like basically anything. So is there like any limit to what can we talk or do in a podcast? And if so, what is the limit? Thank you.
Do you mean rules?
Yeah, like rules, like
Mhm.
what can we talk about? What can we not talk about?
Okay, yeah. Thank you, Patria.
Okay, Patria. Is there any limit? No, there is no limit, because you are the one who will create the limit. You know what I mean, yeah? You are the one who create the limit, not anyone else. You adjust or you pick what you can talk or what you cannot talk, you know. But because every podcast is different, every podcast is we have different ideas, but we need to remember again what type of podcast uh, that we create. For example, if we do educational podcast, of course we cannot do some swearing, something like that, okay? Or your slang language, you cannot use that. But if it is like a comedy podcast, something like that, yeah, you may use that. And then if you want an example of valuable podcast, is there any limit? No, there is no limit. But in every episode, we create our limit. For example, okay, if you talk with, uh, for example, if you talk with, or if we do some interviews with Persebaya player, of course we cannot talk about something that he's not allowed to talk, something like that. Okay, yeah. But in general, if you ask if is there any limit, no, there is no limit, because you guys are the one who adjust the limit. Do you want to go free, or do you want to go like there is something that sometimes something you cannot talk, something like that. But yeah, I think in general there are no rules of limitation. It just depends on how you, or what type of podcast you create. Of course, you cannot swear, you cannot uh talk like, bad words if you are the host of educational podcast, something like that. And if it's not, yeah, that's no limitation. Just depends of your type of podcast. That's it. The answer is, yeah, depends on your type of podcast.
Yeah. Thank you, Mas Ganta. Any
Thank
other questions, guys? I think I have one question, Mas Ganta. So, sometimes we see that there are podcasts who are very long. Yeah. Is there any, what is it? The appropriateness, yeah, the appropriateness of the duration of the podcast. So maybe the one that can is it, gain more attention, maybe because in my own opinion, if it is too long, it will be boring. Yeah. So the best time, or the best duration for each episode, is there any, what is it, appropriateness?
Okay, Miss Lina, thanks. Is there any, again, limitation of the time? Yeah. Yeah, no, there is no limitation, but of course, we all have experience to listen to podcast. Yeah, okay. We ask ourselves how many minutes we usually listen to an episode. Okay. Yeah, maybe in the first 10 minutes, we are still interested, but after 10 minutes or 15 minutes, if the talk is not getting more interesting, of course we will get bored on, or we may stop the podcast episode. But today, okay, we talk about the original format of podcast, the only audio only, audio only. But today we've seen a lot of podcasts that have video on YouTube. Yeah, so okay, they play the video. They don't just talk about an issue, but they also show a video. Maybe 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 that's why they can make the audience menjadi betah gitu loh, karena ada videonya tuh. Tapi kalau cuman audio itu kan mungkin terkadang kalau topiknya tidak menarik, pasti akan membosankan gitu. So, what do I think about the best time of create an episode podcast? I think 30 minutes is, yeah, maximum. I can imagine listening to an podcast episode that has length 45 minutes is too long. 30 minutes is fine. But sometimes 20 minutes, 25 minutes is, I think, the best length, 20 minutes. Okay, 5 minutes of the introduction, after 15 minutes of the talks. And maybe if it get more interesting, you can add some more minutes, like 5 minutes. Yeah, 35 minutes, okay lah. Don't make it too long, like 1 hour. Yeah, that's why you need to have your episode plan. So questions, you need to have your something you want to talk about. Yeah, if it's all done, you can finish the episode. If it's all checklist, yeah, you can finish your episode. But if there is something you haven't finished yet about your topic, yeah, you still talk, but don't make it too long, like 1 hour. No. I don't recommend 1 hour podcast, as long as it's already checklist of your issue, your topic. It's already checklist all. That's fine. But no, 1 hour 1 hour is too long, I think. 1 hour is too long. Yeah. But I think the question is, why a lot of podcasters specifically on YouTube, yeah, they have long episode of podcast, like 1 hour, maybe 1 hour and 32 hours, and yeah, maybe longer. Yeah, of course, because they already create a money in there. So the more they create a longer episode, the more audience will come. It just, yeah. But I think ya obrolannya ya akhirnya sama aja gitu. Apa, the talk is not interesting anymore. Just maybe the first 20 minutes is that's the best time. I think 20 minutes. 20 minutes. Yeah, I'll go with 20 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much, Mas Ganta. So, guys, the best duration for the podcast is around 20 minutes. So you need to pay attention to that for you to create or produce your own podcast later on. Okay, any other questions? Yes? More questions? No questions? So, because this is a good opportunity for you to ask anything about podcast for you to prepare your next project. Okay, then. So it seems you have no more questions. Okay, Mas Ganta, I think it's already enough for, sorry, excuse me. It's already enough for it's already enough for our meeting today. And thank you very much for sharing. And guys, next task for you is to make a plan, yeah, to make a plan for your podcast later on. So it will be a group work. So later on, I will talk about this with you, but for sure, you need to make a plan for your podcast. And go back to Mas Ganta. Thank you very much for giving us or letting us know your experience, your knowledge about podcasts. And then, is there any last, what is it? Last words for these guys to prepare their project for the podcast?
Okay, yeah. I think one thing that you guys need to pay attention on is that, yeah, be clear what you want to what type of podcast you want to create, and be clear about the theme of your podcast. Oke, temanya gitu, temanya apa itu harus jelas gitu. Karena ya because if you are not clear from the beginning, yeah, of course you will get confused when you create the episode plan. You see, just be clear in the beginning what type of podcast and what theme of the podcast. Okay, what the genre of the podcast. Yeah, be clear, just be clear. And if you are not sure, you just consider again why you want to make this kind of podcast. Okay, yeah, simple as that.
Yeah, so starting from the type, Mas. Yeah.
Yeah, type.
Okay, so you need to consider the type first, and then you will what is it? You will prepare for the next one. But for sure, be sure with your type first. Okay. So guys, I just posted a barcode for the exit ticket of today's meeting. Please fill it that one so that it can be your attendance for this session. Okay, so if you have no more questions to Mas Ganta, once again, Mas, thank you very much for sharing. We do hope very best luck for you for your podcast channel, yeah, and yeah, see you. Hopefully, we can meet you directly when you are in Surabaya.
Okay, thank you, Miss Lina, and thank you guys for the
Okay,
times.
yeah, thank you. See you again. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Thank you, ma'am. Mas
Yeah.
Gata.
So guys, I will give you some time to fill in the exit ticket. And after that, we'll close the meeting.